The other interesting part about human evolution and climate is, of course, why modern humans started to consume so much milk. There have been ideas before that it was a favored expression of a gene of for lactase persistence, the enzyme that can digest milk, and that became or that evolved, let's say, in Europe and spread to other parts of the world because the gene variant for lactase persistence for the Indian population, for example, is similar to that in the Europeans. So the new paper that just came out uses milk fat from residues on pots and so on from various places and uses some modeling again to come up with a new idea that milk in general made people sick, and it had pathogens, it gave diarrhea, and especially when it was consumed during lean periods with bad climate, droughts, lack of crop yields and so on, it probably made people so sick that they died. So the idea here is that it's not that more and more people consumed milk and then lactase persistence became genetically expressed. It's called a monogenic trait, single gene expression that allowed digestion of milk and so on. So this paper basically says comparison of model likelihoods indicates that population fluctuations, settlement density, and wild animal exploitation proxies for these drivers are used in these model likelihood models. That these provide better explanations of lactase persistence selection than the extent of milk exploitation. So it's not that lots of people were drinking milk. In fact, it may be that people who actually drank milk during bad climate, especially when they were weak from lack of nutrition, would have died away, and a selection would have happened for those who had a lactase persistence that got selected. These findings offer new perspectives on prehistoric milk exploitation and lactase persistence evolution. Well, kind of a very brief introduction, but the paper looks at this. So this is regional variation in milk use in prehistoric Europe. Again, prehistoric is back to more than 5,000 years ago. Interpolated time slices of the frequency of dairy fat residues in potsherds with the colored hues, and confidence in estimate the color saturations. So the scale is given here. So unknown when it's gray, no milk residues found, and 100% milk evidence found in this color scale. I don't want to go into the details, but basically it indicates that it's not like there is continuous increase in milk consumption along the way. So there has been variation, especially when you look at 7,000 to 6,500 BC. There's a complete lack of milk consumption in these regions, and there is no evidence that can be relied on upon here, whereas there is some partial saturation here. Similarly, 6,500 to 5,500 BC, you can see the change here. So lactase evidence has disappeared here. 5,500 to 5,000 BC, much less milk evidence in potsherds over here. 5,000 to 4,500 BC. So the population densities, settlements, and milk consumption have changed over time. This is 4,500 to 3,500 BC, 3,500 to 2,000 BC, and 2,000 BC to AD 1,500. So even very recently you see there is no evidence. So now you don't have regions with unknown information or lack of information. So we have evidence of milk or no milk pretty much everywhere. Okay, so keeping that in mind, bandwidth and saturation parameters were optimized using cross-validation. Circles indicate the observed frequencies. I won't go into the next figure here. At site phase locations, broad southeast to northeast Klein of colors saturation at the beginning of the Neolithic period illustrates a sampling bias towards the earliest evidence of milk use, so there is statistical sampling issues. Substantial heterogeneity in milk exploitation is evident across mainland Europe. By contrast, the British Isles and Western France maintain a gradual declines across 7,000 years after first evidence of milk about 5500 BC. Note that interpolation can color some areas, particularly islands, for which no data is present. So you can compare the way there was no clear evidence here back to the beginning of the Neolithic, and you can see it changes and becomes saturated, and then changes, becomes less so over more recent years and so on. So just another way science works, that the ideas of how lactase persistence or dairy milk consumption and the persistence of the milk use even when there is lactose intolerance is amazing, because now you get milk with additives which help you digest milk if you're naturally lactose intolerant, and there are many populations in the world which are still lactose intolerant. So lactose intolerance is not anything unusual in that sense. Okay, nonetheless, dairy and cattle are a big part of human society, and whenever you talk about human impact, human diet impact, especially on the environment, beef tops the list in terms of what is worst per calorie for the environment, water use, land exploitation, degradation of the environment, and so on. So this is for 2018 on Our World in Data. There is an animation that goes from some year to 2018. So this is milk production in millions of tons. So data on milk production relate to total production of whole fresh milk, excluding milk sucked by the young animals, but including amounts in livestock. So obviously there are some big dairy producers, including India, which is obviously a big cattle country with all kinds of controversies associated with beef consumption, protection of cows, and so on. And there are some countries in Europe which dominate, South America, of course. But milk production is also part of the milk consumption business. Gets converted to yogurt, cheese, and various chocolate products, and makes it into many different food products as well. But still, direct per capita milk consumption for 2017 here, data is based on per capita food supply at the consumer level, but does not account for food waste at the consumer level. So you can again see that there are some countries which are somehow very high in milk consumption up here in the Scandinavia. US is much higher. Even though India is high in milk production, it's not so high in consumption. Often it's access, quality, and physical and economic access, and so on. So poor countries can be low in milk consumption per capita because of cost, if for example. But there is also the idea of global meat production from 1961 to 2018. Obviously Asia has grown quite a bit. Europe remains almost the same. North America has grown. South America has grown because Argentina, Brazil, etc. are huge exporters of beef and steak and so on. Europe, of course, makes a lot of cheese compared to others, and US does as well. And there are Africa and Oceania. If you look at lactose breakdown, only 1/3 of the adults can actually digest milk. The rest stop making enzyme needed to process milk sugar. So lactase persistence is still absent in such large populations. So prevalence of lactose intolerance here. China is notorious, and Southeast Asia for lactose intolerance. India has got fairly significant fraction as well, and the US, of course, many milk products with added lactase are sold here. Higher percentages of lactose intolerance in Central and South America, and very high intolerance here in parts of Africa, going into Sahel and Sahara, and Russia has a significant fraction of lactose intolerance as well. So it's amazing how we have interacted with domestication of animals, cattle, milk exploitation, despite its ability to make us sick. Milk consumption has persisted, and lactose intolerance persists as well. So there is no large-scale genetic mutation that produces lactase persistence across the world, but there are definitely populations that carry the monogenic trait or the genetic change that favored lactase persistence. So the question really is how it evolved, and this paper argues that it wasn't because of widespread persistent milk exploitation, but just random consumption of milk along the way, which still continues, of course. Okay, and there is, of course, the debate about whether milk is good for us or not, whether it can causes stomach problems. Yogurt is better than milk, and so on and so forth. But anyway, that's a different matter. But you can see how milk production, milk consumption, and environment are now tied up. So in that sense, this evolutionary aspect is still a part of the climate and human evolution story we are trying to put together here. Okay.